certainly just a sneak preview, but we had been working on the timing for a while, and have kind of come up with a fairly solid timeline, and so wanted to just share this with you all. I know it's still a little bit away from when we will be launching our call for commitments, but as those of you who were commitment makers last year know, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to brainstorm and create and draft and refine your commitments. So it's certainly not too early to start spinning up ideas now. So for 2020, the timing for the call for commitments is going to be a little bit different. It'll be a little earlier in 2020. So we're going to launch in April 2020, the next call for commitments. The deadline is actually going to be in September. So we'll actually, I should rephrase that, because technically the second call for commitments is a little bit further back than our previous call for commitments. But what we thought would be really helpful is to actually have the call for commitments run through the summer and then into the start of the new school year. So we'll have the deadline end in September. And then what we'd like to do is nationally announce and celebrate the commitments in October 2020, not 2010. We're not going back in time. For this next call for commitments, it's going to be, because it's the second year, it will include new commitments. So we're really certainly looking for organizations that want to make brand new commitments in support of maker-centered learning. So that includes new partnerships or collaborations or initiatives, but we also equally welcome updates on existing commitments. So some of you had commitments that you made last year, or this year rather, that were multi-year commitments, like commitments that would be completed over the course of 2 or 3 years. We'd love to include updates and celebrate the progress you've made on those commitments. And then for those of you who made a commitment that you met, but you feel really strongly about, continuing to grow in your community, expansion of existing commitments is something that we're also looking for. So this is just a sneak preview. As we get a little closer to when we'll be launching the call, we'll start to host commitment design brainstorm workshops online, so that we can kind of put our heads together and leverage the intellectual capital of the community to help you get feedback on your commitment ideas, and then also potentially make connections with organizations around the country that you might be able to partner with on some of the commitments that you might want to announce. The next thing I wanted to update you all on is a new program that Citizen Schools is designing, and something that a number of you might be interested in. So it's called Maker Fellows, and really when we talk to you all, and we talk to lots of different stakeholders around the country who were really committed to supporting maker-centered learning in their communities, capacity and talent continue to be, and expertise in maker education continue to be a primary challenge for improving the sustainability of maker-centered learning initiatives in communities. And so we heard that very strongly from this whole last call for commitments process, and we've continued to have those conversations with different organizations that have been working in this space for quite some time. And as a way to address some of these challenges, what we have decided to do is to launch a program called Maker Fellows. And Maker Fellows has 5 specific goals. One is certainly to expand high quality and sustainable maker-centered learning experiences for underrepresented and non-traditional students. This includes students who are at a wide variety of places in their educational experience. So this includes post-secondary students who are at community colleges, as well as K-12 students. We also we recognized also that community colleges have increasingly been playing a role in accelerating and reinforcing the capacity around maker-centered learning in communities, and really serving as a hub and extending in both directions, where they're doing a lot of outreach to K-12, and they're also working really closely to help build an ecosystem in communities that place maker-centered learning at the center of career and technical opportunities, so that you're really seeing alignment between students' competencies and their technical skills and employers' needs. And then the 4th and the 5th goals for this program is really around service. So Maker Fellows are going to be, essentially working in public service. And the idea around this is that Maker Fellows are actually going to be part of the AmeriCorps Service Members Program. And so these individuals will be really exposed to a wide variety of leadership, community building, training, and professional development opportunities. And we're really trying to create a model for national service that's scalable and replicable, both within the field of maker-centered learning, but potentially outside of it as well. So how this works, so essentially the idea is that while being hosted by a community college or a youth serving organization, a Maker Fellow will really focus on growing and improving the sustainability of maker-centered learning opportunities in their communities. So I mentioned before, so the idea is that a Maker Fellow is actually going to be part of the Corporation for National and Community Service, AmeriCorps, and VISTA programs. So for those of you who are somewhat familiar with MakerEd's MakerCorps program, the mechanics of this part of the program is similar in the sense that the fellows themselves will actually be part of this national service program. And the idea with Maker Fellows is that they'll be placed at host sites around the country, and these host sites could actually be community colleges, and they could also be youth serving organizations. One of the big reasons why we wanted to put a specific focus on these 2 kinds of organizations is that we recognize there's a lot of potential if we look at both community colleges and youth serving organizations that work with K-12 students in terms of really creating a spectrum across which young people and students can have sustainable maker-centered learning experiences that don't just stop when they graduate from high school, but continue on in the post-secondary space, and then as they're preparing for their careers. And community colleges really lower and have been lowering lowering the barriers to access for maker education in communities around the country. So fellows themselves, they can actually work in either a direct service or capacity building role. So just a couple examples of what we mean by direct service or capacity building. A fellow could help to develop and implement new maker-centered learning programming. They could partner with school districts to redesign high school career and technical education curriculum. They could help to stand up local communities of practice around maker-centered learning or maker education for faculty and educators. So essentially, a Maker Fellow could work very directly with students, or they could work to help an organization or the broader community in terms of expanding what they're doing, whether that's in a sort of field building capacity or building out a network that's helping to support maker-centered learning overall. And then in terms of kind of the term of service, a fellow will have, each fellow will serve full-time. So this is essentially a full-time role for 1 year. So just a little bit of information, and I want to preface this with, I'm giving you some pretty high-level information about how the Maker Fellows program is designed, and how and some of the mechanics around selection for host sites and things like that, and the roles of the Maker Fellows and the communities that they'll serve in. But if there are additional questions and things of that nature, please feel free to reach out to me after this call, because we'd be really interested in speaking with any community colleges or youth serving organizations that would be interested in being a host site for these fellows. So the selection criteria for host sites, I just included a couple of key criteria here. Essentially, we're looking for host sites, organizations that have demonstrated that they have existing priorities around maker-centered learning, that they have a strong history of collaborating across different sectors within their communities, including in K-12 maker education. So if you're a community college, we would really want to see that you're also working closely with other organizations in locally who are working with K-12 students. And then, and vice versa, if you're a youth serving organization, we would love to be able to see, experience with you having worked with a community college on some aspects of the maker education initiatives that you're working on. And then specific needs that a Maker Fellow could address in a direct service or capacity building role. We know that, 1 year term of service isn't that long, but we really want to make sure that some of we really want to make sure that the challenges or the responsibilities that you think would be appropriate for a Maker Fellow are realistically something that a Maker Fellow could significantly make progress on within their 1 year term of service, and that they would be having an impact on the organization that they are working within, and the community more broadly that they're working within. And then also we'd be looking for host sites who have, the capacity and resources to support the Maker Fellows service experience and their programmatic efforts. So these are, more specifically things like a workspace for the Maker Fellow, having somebody who would be an ideal supervisor, manager, and a team that a Maker Fellow would be working with, so that their experience is one that's obviously a rich one for themselves as well. And just in terms of timing, for those of you who are actually pretty interested in potentially joining as a host site or participating as a host site, Between now and early November, we're going to be inviting institutions to apply as a host site. So if you're interested in potentially being a host site, I would really encourage you to reach out to me. After the call, we'll be having sort of one-on-one initial conversations with organizations or institutions, and then we will have kind of a sort of an invitation-only application that institutions will complete, and then the idea is that host sites will be selected in December of 2019. And that'll be for the first cohort of this Maker Fellows program. In January, we'll notify the organizations that have been selected as host sites, and then February through May of 2020, Citizen Schools will work to recruit and interview Maker Fellows candidates with the host sites. So the idea is that Citizen Schools has the support and infrastructure to actually help assist the host sites in identifying candidates that would be really strong contenders for being a Maker Fellow. And ideally, we also recognize that it would be great for Maker Fellows, the Maker Fellows themselves, to come from the communities that they will be working in. So that's something that we've also thought about and talked a lot about, is that with the AmeriCorps program, sometimes you have potential applicants that come from all around the country, but we recognize the real value of actually having fellows who are already personally invested in the community that they would serve their year term of service in. And then the idea is that the Maker Fellows would actually begin their one-year term of service in July of 2020, so this next summer. So as I said before, we're really interested in connecting with organizations and community colleges who are interested in serving as a host site. We're actually going to be working with a couple of really wonderful collaborators, and we have been actually working with a number of these collaborators on the design and implementation of the program to date. So that includes the National Association for Community College Entrepreneurship, the CCC Maker Initiative based here in California, and of course Maker Ed, who ran such a successful Maker Core and Vista program previously. And so just having their expertise and knowledge and their experience in terms of them sharing as part of this process has been hugely valuable. And the program itself has actually been really generously supported by Schmidt Futures and Arconic Foundation. So those are two of the organizations that have provided the initial funding for the design and planning of this program, as well as parts of the implementation. So if you're interested, please feel free to contact me by email. I put my email address here, but I'll also pause here just to see if folks have, one or two like shorter questions about the Maker Fellows program or the call for commitments for 2020 before we move into kind of our open forum discussion. So if you have a question, I think what you can do is you can either type it out in the chat section of your dashboard using the chat feature, or you can raise your hand. There's a little hand raising icon on your dashboard, and then we'll be able to unmute you. Okay, I'll wait a couple more seconds just to see if folks have questions. Okay, Niti, think you've got a yes, I can.
I'll unmute Nikki for you.
Thanks, Megan. Nikki, I think you might be unmuted. I think you had a question, and Megan and
yes, yeah. Sorry, I joined a little later, but I just had a quick question on the Maker Fellow program. Is it a paid internship? Sorry, I was like late to join in the call, but it sounds really interesting.
Fine. Yeah, so it is actually a paid, it's a full-time paid position, and the way that it's structured is actually that it's through a national service program that it is administered through the Corporation for National and Community Service, which runs, so they're the federal agency that runs the AmeriCorps and VISTA programs. So Citizen Schools actually has a longstanding grantee of the Corporation for National and Community Service, and our organization has been working with AmeriCorps and VISTA fellows for the past 20 years. And one of the things that we have sort of, the way that we structured Maker Fellows is that essentially they will be AmeriCorps or VISTA fellows as part of sort of extending the Citizen Schools' existing relationship with CNCS. So they will be paid. They will also receive benefits like healthcare and things like that. And actually, the infrastructure, like the back-end infrastructure for that, would be provided by Citizen Schools. So you can kind of think of it as like host sites will be different organizations or colleges across the country, but the overhead infrastructure of managing the fellows as employees will actually come from Citizen Schools. So they'll be AmeriCorps members or VISTA members that'll technically be Citizen Schools employees, but they will be fellows hosted at sites all around the country. So those host sites don't have to go through the process of, they don't have to take on the overhead that would be required for things like benefits and healthcare and things like that.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
We got a question in the chat box from Nathan Parker. He asked if I was to share this call for collaborators or fellows with my network, is there a website or brochure somewhere summarizing the call to action that's easily shareable?
Yes. So Nate, I can actually, we do have like a two-pager for the Maker Fellows program that I'm happy to share with you. Feel free to, I'll send you an email, but it has just kind of, it's in like a Q&A format or an FAQs format, and that might be the kind of most straightforward thing to share with your partner organizations. But if you do know of a particular organization that you think would be a really strong candidate, feel free to follow up with me afterwards, and we can connect directly. All right. Any other questions? Any other ones coming through, Megan?
Not right now.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I think my computer's a little sticky. Well, the next portion of what we were going to do on this call was actually to move into the open forum discussion. So if I can get my computer to advance. There we go. I had a couple of questions that are here that I thought we could use to sort of tee up conversation. But then I also want to make sure that we're touching on topics and things that are sort of most pressing to the folks that had joined today. So if there's a particular topic or question that you would like to bring up, please feel free. But maybe what I'll do is I'll just kick us off. And I mean, the first one is really pretty. I feel like almost everybody on this webinar probably has something that they might want to say and weigh in on this question. But just to ask, you know, what are some of the things you're currently most excited about in terms of the work that is being done around maker-centered learning? Maybe it's something that you're working on, or something that a colleague or partner organization has been working on. But I would love to hear sort of thoughts on this. It's a little bit of a kind of state of the field kind of question as well. And this could also be for those who attended the Maker Education convening in Pittsburgh over the weekend. I'm sure that you probably have come back with lots of amazing ideas and food for thought, just based off of having participated in that event. So feel free to raise your hand or share on chat. Okay, Nitty.
Hi. So I can go first. I guess I can share something which we just started in Maker Lab here at Cornell Tech in New York City.
That sounds great.
This is kind of a prelude, you can say, to a spring workshop I teach, which includes and brings in medical students with our graduate students, which are majority of them are in computer science, business management, ECE. It's a varied group, and also community members. So we started this kind of hacker space on Fridays, which allows any of our community members, Cornell Tech faculty, or students to kind of submit a project which they would like to design and make using the tools which we have in the lab here. So it's just the beginning, but because we have a network already from our community and some other people who have been always asking, and how can we get involved? This, I think, has opened up as a great venue for people to come. Our next big challenge is how do we run this as a true hackerspace and not as a consulting company where people come in with a lot of expectations to finish their project as, here you go, I don't know laser machine, I don't know any other tools, how can you make it for me? Can your students make it for me? So we are kind of trying to see those pedagogy in hackerspaces, if that exists in any other higher academic makerspaces, to see if we can continue this as more like an open space where young people, seniors, community groups can come from surrounding neighborhoods and can learn design and making skills and execute their projects, right? So, yeah.
Nidhi, that's really interesting. I'm curious, would you be able to share a couple of examples of like the projects that people have brought in that they are looking to make progress on during that sort of hackerspace time that you mentioned?
Yeah. So first few projects, one of the projects which we are working on right now, which we onboarded 2 weeks ago, is a local organization called Work to RI, which is Work to Roosevelt Island, in collaboration with an Open Doors, which is another organization in New York City, had created a professional development for Kohler Hospital residents. And they have collected all these audio files, recordings of those members who are gun violence victims, and they want to create an interactive map, which they have never done before, but they would like to bring in that in an art form. So they have artists in their group, they have they have activists in the group, and it's an amazing group of people who would like to make this huge 6 feet by, they have different vision, they have their materials, and now they're ready to kind of like make it using physical computing and digital fabrication tools, which we have to offer. And none of these people are exposed to that, but they have been in the Maker Lab before in different capacities, so they know it's possible. So that's how we are kind of starting the process with. And we'll be documenting this as very closely in terms of just our, for our research value and like how different people learn about the making and digital fabrication tools and computing. So, but yeah, so that's one example of a project, which is called I Can Breathe Interactive Map. And there are other couple of projects also, but I won't take much time here.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, it also seems like it also seems like part of the opportunity for this kind of open space that you're open time and space that you're hosting and making available to like the broader community is also an opportunity to engage makers in more, I guess, continued participation in the space and in the community at Maker Lab, because it sounds like some of the I guess it depends on the project, but like this particular project is obviously ongoing over the course of several weeks, if not maybe it extends for a couple months, but it's like it creates the potential for individuals who maybe have larger scale projects to actually want to spend time in the lab developing those skills, and then also adding new collaborators to their projects that they probably wouldn't have had access to before.
Yeah, as I said, it's been only 3 weeks, but I can already see it as a very a natural flow of people bringing people in terms of collaboration. It's been really amazing to see folks walking in and jumping in right away in their own capacity and understanding and interpreting what it is that what I can do here and how do I contribute. And also kind of helps my students to you know, break that barriers between a lot of different age group of learners, that, because you don't see that often on the campuses, right? That you don't see a 60-year-old community member just sitting next to you working on the same design problem which you are working on. So, and that's, of course, that's my interest of work also. So it's great, but it just, yes, it has come to, it has really become a good point for me to connect people who I talk individually, maybe in the whole year or a semester's time, to kind of bring them together, and then it just, the ties happens naturally.
That's great. Well, would love to continue to get updates from you as the sort of the semester progresses, just to hear more about how the projects, the kinds of projects that you're seeing come through during that hackerspace time, and you know, some of the new partnerships and things that have resulted as a result of that. Thanks for sharing. Other folks that are on the line that would love to share a little bit about some of the work that they're doing, or work that you've seen that others have done that's inspired you around maker-centered learning? Okay, if not about what has been sort of exciting to you, what about the second and third question? So the second one was around challenges that you're facing around your work related to maker-centered learning, or the other thing that I'm constantly always thinking about is, what is current research or frameworks or tools in this space that have really helped you in terms of grounding your work and kind of making a case for this kind of learning to others in the community more broadly. Don't be shy. Well, while we're waiting, I can actually share one piece of research that I've found to be really helpful, and we are also constantly going back to more broadly with the work that we've been doing around Make for All and the work of citizen schools more broadly, and that's actually there's been research, really pretty solid research that's been done by Raj Chetty and Alex Bell that has to do with looking at essentially it's who ends up being an inventor in the US, and the ways that exposure to innovation and exposure to role models play a real role in essentially the extent to which students end up growing up to be inventors or innovators. And what they ended up doing was they took data from essentially huge data sets that were publicly available around patent holders. And I think we know that innovation exists beyond, innovation and invention exists beyond just being a patent holder. But I do think that the research is really interesting because it looked at over 1 million data points across patent holders around the US and found that there were pretty significant differences in terms of the ways in which race, gender, and socioeconomic background really affect the extent to which a student grows up to be an inventor. And so their argument, which I think really also makes the case for broadening access to maker-centered learning and the role that makers can have as mentors and role models. What they found was that individuals or students who had the ability to be in an environment where they're exposed to innovation at a younger age as they're growing up, whether that's through role models or through hands-on maker-oriented learning experiences that really allow them to see themselves as inventors and creators, have a much better chance of becoming an inventor as they get older. So I think that's one particular piece of ongoing research that I found to be pretty interesting. I think the first paper was published in 2017, but they continue to make revisions to it. So they just made an update and re-released the paper earlier this year in 2019. Other research that you all have found pretty powerful, or frameworks or tools around maker education? And it could also be things that you've developed in your own organizations that you think would be valuable for others to know about and use. Other topic areas that you all want to touch upon or cover in this call? Everybody's so quiet today. Okay, well, I'll give folks 1 or 2 more minutes to think about if there's anything that they want to share around the work that they're doing more generally. Otherwise, we could also wrap up a little bit early today, and then in November for our next call, we'll be flipping back to our kind of the format that we've been using for the past couple months, where we have individuals present on the work that they're doing, and then also having a couple of organizations who've been supporting Maker-Centered Learning join us to share their perspective, and then also to share opportunities, funding opportunities with us as well. All right, well, if there's no one else that has anything pressing that they want to share or to ask the group, I would just flag that, again, if your organization is interested in participating in the Maker Fellows program as a host site, potentially, please feel free to reach out to me sooner rather than later. My email address is stephanie.santoso@citizenschools.org, and we will be looking to invite organizations to apply to be a host site between now and early November. So just a couple more weeks in this time period. And then otherwise, I look forward to speaking with you all in November for our next community call. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Steph.